Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Hi, I'm Sunny and I'm a software engineer. Today in this video, I'll be covering a very important topic which is test-driven development. In order to write a good software or build a good application, you need to know how to test your software. So the very first thing we need to understand here is what is TDD, test-driven development. Okay, this term is very popular in the software industry, and this is one of the most important thing to know in order to crack any good companies, because in interviews generally when you get coding assessment or let's say if you have a live coding round, then generally you will be evaluated on the basis of how you write code, and if you know TDD and if you are able to use TDD while solving such coding problems, then you are a potential candidate. So today in this video I'll show you TDD in action. Okay, I'll show you how do you first we'll try to understand what is TDD, why it is important, and then I'll show you a demo on a simple project on how to approach TDD, right? If you are someone who is learning this for the first time, or if you are wondering how do you do TDD, whether you work as a software engineer or whether you are trying to complete an assessment, coding assessment, or you're trying to attend some live coding round, right? So all those things will be covered in this video. So watch till the end. And at the end, one important thing is that I'll be sharing the GitHub repo for which I'm doing this demo. I'll be just showing you the initial steps, and for practice, you can basically continue the same project or further steps. Okay, let's dive into it. So what is TDD? What is test-driven development? I hope a lot of you must have heard about TDD, and you must be aware that it is a thing where we say that first write test and then you write your code to pass this test, and then you probably refactor your code if needed. Okay, so it must be very confusing, right? That why would you write your test first if there is no code at all, right? Generally, we have seen a pattern, or you must have thought of that once you write the code, then basically you write your test to basically assert or validate your software or the application you have written, right? But here the things is basically reverse. First you write test for code which doesn't exist, and then you basically write the minimal possible code which will help you to pass this test, and then you refactor if needed. And once you refactor, then you will go ahead and add another bit of it. Like basically you will be doing stepwise. So let's say if you are writing a calculator, right, there will be a scenario that for certain things you might be knowing the what needs to be done. Let's say if you are writing a simple add function, then you know, right, that there will be two parameters and then you will be adding them and returning the sum of it, right? But there are scenarios which you will come across when you'll be working as a software engineer. So think of something where you don't know what could be the probable test cases, right? So given a problem, you first try to think of the test cases you'll be requiring to implement the scenario, the happy path, non-happy path, everything, right? And then you basically write those tests first, basically to validate those scenarios one by one. And in this way, basically, if you follow this for multiple times, you will end up completing your feature. So yeah, that's the basic gist of it. So now I'll start with the demo. I'll show you how to do it on a very simple project, and I'll try to do it like stepwise so that you get the idea of what is TDD, how to approach it, and you will also learn why we do a certain thing in a certain way. Okay, so let's start. So as you can see on my screen that we have a string calculator TDD kata open. Okay, this is basically a task you can think of where the expectation is that you should be able to follow TDD. So I have a Java project I've already created which is basically empty right now. Okay, it has source package and then the test package. So this is the requirement, this is a task basically which we'll be doing. It's a simple calculator. Okay, we must have written this code hundreds of times during our academics or while learning how to code. Today what we will see, we will try to do the same thing in a TDD way. Okay, so let's start off. So what it is about, it is a string calculator. Basically this task is meant for those who want to learn TDD. Okay, so they have also provided some tips. What it says, start with the simplest test case of an empty string and move to one or two numbers. Remember to solve the problems in a simple manner so that you can force yourself to write test you did not think about. Remember to refactor after each passing test. So what they are basically suggesting that you should always try to solve the given problem in the simplest manner so that you can think of every small steps so that you can come up with the test, and then you proceed incrementally. So basically here they have asked to create a string calculator with a method signature like this. Okay, and then the input would be a string of a comma separated numbers, and the output is basically the sum of the numbers. Okay, input would look something like this. For empty quotes, we should be returning 0 as there are no numbers. For single input, single number input, you should be returning 1, and for two numbers, you should be returning the sum of it, right? So let's try to follow this first, and then we'll see how we can incrementally proceed, right? So basically here we are creating a calculator app. So let me go to the IntelliJ. I'll start off with the test. I'll create a Java class. I will call it a string calculator test, okay? And now we have the class. So the very first test, what it would be? So the very first thing we need to check is that given an empty string, the return output should be 0. So you should write the test name, idea of writing a test name that it should convey what you are doing. So basically what we are trying to do is should return 0 for empty string. Okay. And for this, basically we know the signature of the method, right? That there will be a add method which will have basically a string as an input. Okay. So the very first thing I can think of is that in order to have this method, we'll be requiring a class, right? So what could be the class name? Maybe a string calculator. So what we can do is we can create a string calculator, okay? And then it will give you compilation error because there is no such class. So I forgot to mention there is a thing called red-green-refactor. When you follow TDD, you will always come across this red-green-refactor thing. What does that mean? That means whenever you will start off with the test, you will see red, right? Because everything must be failing. It could be a compilation error, it could be a runtime error. So right now when I write string calculator for the first time, you see red, right? Now my next task should be to pass this with the minimal code. So for that, it's simple, right? We need to create this class. For that, it should give you the hint to create that class, right? So I can select create class string calculator, and maybe I'll change the package. I want it to be in the Java package, the source folder. And then this is the package. Yeah, this should be fine, like source main Java, under which I want to create this class add. Simple, right? Once you add the class, it's green now, right? Even a compilation error, if you're seeing, you should consider it as a red stage. Now, the next thing I did, I created the class, make it green. Now, what is the next step? Let me store it in a local variable. Okay. Let me simply call it a calculator. Like while you are writing test, you should also be ensuring that your test is readable. Okay. So I call it a calculator. Now, this calculator should add something, right? As we know that the signature should be something like this, where the return type should be int, and then the function name or the method name is add, and then it takes an input parameter which is numbers, and it's a string in format. So similarly, I have created a method and then passing an empty string for which we are writing the test. Now this is also red. Now the next thing you need to do is you need to create this method simply. Okay, it should return me what? Int, as suggested in the task. And then it should say the parameter should be numbers and then return 0. Okay. So this is the default method we'll be writing to pass this test. So this is what is expected, right? So I can say result, or let's say sum. So this will basically return you a sum for an empty string. And what we are expecting here is that it should be 0. So we can simply use JUnit. So I'm using Java with JUnit. If you're using some other language, you will be having a test library for that language, right? Compatible library. So you'll be using that. So in my case, let me show you. I'm using basically JUnit. So if you see JUnit Jupyter, I'm using as a library, test library, which is having these functions assert equals and so on. So here, what you need to do is I need to import this, and then here the expected value is 0 and sum is this. This is what we are getting back, right? So right now, if you see, as we added the default method here, it is taking us numbers as a parameter and then returning 0 by default. And if we run this test, this should ideally be passing, right? What you could have done is you could have written any number here, like let's say -1, right? Because you don't know, and you must have a failing test here. But let's say if I change it to 0, this would pass, right? This is the minimal code I need to write to pass my test. Okay, so here if you see, we are still not using numbers and we are returning 0, which is a sort of a default value, you can say. So at this point, like my criteria is satisfied, right? If I'm passing an empty string, I'm getting 0 and I'm happy. Like my code is happy, my test is running, and I'm good to go, right? Let's see the next task. The next task is that if you get a string with a single input number, then you should be returning that value, right? And if it is empty, then it should be 0. So So simple, right? I'll write another test. Basically, let me write another test. What I can say is should return one operand. We call it what? Like these numbers, we call it as operands, right? 1, 5, and so on. So what I'm saying is that if it should return the same number if it is a single operand, right? So my test would look like what? Something similar. I'll just copy paste this. So here my input parameter would be 1 and then the expected would be 1 also. So now if I run this test, it should fail. Now you see the expected is 1, but actual value we are getting is 0. And now you have to think of writing a minimal possible code to pass this test. And also you have to make sure that you're not breaking other tests. So let me just show you how you can do that. So let's say in order to pass this test, what is the criteria? That if it is empty, then return 0. If it is having a single value, then simply return 1, right? So here you can simply do one thing. You can have a simple check which checks for objects.equals and then you pass this value, numbers, and then empty string. If it is this, return 0, else return that number, right? It's a single number, we know. So it returns a integer, so we have to parse it as it is a string. And then we can use integer.parseInt, and then we can use parseInt to simply parse and return it. Okay, and we can get rid of the last line. So now if you see your method basically checks for an empty string. If it is empty string, return this. If it is otherwise, it will return the number basically the parsed value of it, integer value of it, right? So if I run this test, this should pass. So once you are able to pass your test which you are writing, you should also run the entire test suite. Like it will have multiple tests and you should verify that you are not breaking any other test in the process, right? So now we are good, right? We are happy with these two criteria. Now what is the second criteria? Now it comes that if you are given two operands or two numbers in your string input, so basically you have to return the sum. Fair enough. So let me just modify this. So what your test would look like? You will be saying should return sum when given two operands. Okay, right? So this is the criteria. Now see, I can simply copy this here. What I can see, my parameter will change, my expectation will change. And if you run this test, this should fail. Right, simple. So this is the process, right? You write your test case first, you run your test, it becomes red. Now you write minimum possible code to pass this test, right? So here in this case, if you notice that it is failing for now, right? Now what we know, if we go back to our code, let's first see what it is breaking for. So it says that for input string this, we are getting a number format exception, right? It is not able to parse it. Why? Because if you see, it is checking for empty string. If it is empty, then it will return 0. Otherwise, it is trying to parse it. Because in our last case, the expectation is that your codes will have single operand. Now it is coming as a two operand. So that is why this whole thing, it is unable to parse to an integer value, which is correct, right? And this is what we need to handle now. So in this case, what we can do? Simple, right? So the other thing which we should be doing here, just the simplest possible thing you can think of, right? We know, right? We can take the value, we can split by comma, we can get two values, then possibly you'll be passing it to integer and then you'll be returning the sum. We know, but here just imagine the scenario where you don't know what is coming next, right? So in that case, the wiser thing to do is go stepwise. So here also I'll try to not complicate the things. I'll try to see what is the minimum possible thing to do here so that I can pass my test, and then we can see if we can further refactor our code or simplify our code, right? So let me see what we can do here. So here, the first thing we are checking for empty codes, then single number, and then we are saying we might also have two numbers. So what is the best way to do it? If you see, what I can notice here is that if there are values which is more than 2, that means we'll have comma, right? So maybe we can add a if condition that if this numbers dot contains comma. If that is the case, I can say that there are two possible operands, right? Now if comma is present, it is obvious that I can simply extract these values, right? So what is the simplest way to do that? So I can say int first, basically first number, it would be what? Your numbers. So first you have to basically split the string using comma. So what I can think of is like this dot split with comma, right? and this would return you what? And we can call it operands, right? We know, right? If we split this value with comma, we'll get two values out of it. And in that case, what we should be able to do, we should be able to extract the values. So operands dot, or it's an array, right? We can do something like this. The first number would be this, but we will need to parse it because it's a string value or a character value. So integer dot parse int, simple, right? This would be your first number. Second number would be what? Let me just call it a second number, and then it would be at index 1. Simple, right? Pretty simple. And then we can probably return the summation of the first number and the second number. Right, let me run this test. What happens? So it is still failing. Okay, I have like mistakenly added 2 as an index. It should be 1, right? 0, 1 for 2 values. So let me run this test. So it should pass now. Now, if you see, this test is also passing. Now, let me run all the tests to ensure that I did not introduce any bug. Okay, so all of it are passing. Now, just look at the code. What I'm doing here, like it looks a little messy, but this is the process. This is the way. First, you have to write the minimum possible code, and then you proceed with refactoring, optimizing your code further, right? So right now it's very evident that we have multiple if else's, but it satisfies our criteria, right? So at this point, what are the scopes? What are the things which I can improve? I can see we have used a lot of string literals, right? String literals. So this is something which we can extract in a constant. So for that, if I do command option C, which is a shortcut, okay, so it would, I'll say it our delimiter. Okay, this is basically our delimiter. Okay. And this can also be replaced with this constant. So basically, when you write code for the first time, and if you are not sure what is, why I'm extracting this out, this basically is a string literal. And if you see, we were using at multiple places, right? So you can simply extract it to a common constant, and then you can use a common constant across your code base, right? Otherwise, whenever you are changing this delimiter, you have to change it at multiple places. But once you extract it, you will require to change only at one place, and every other place will get the updated value, right? So this is the benefit of extracting it out in a constant, right? So similarly, we can extract this to a constant. We can call it as empty string maybe. Okay. Okay, what else we can do? For now it looks good. Let me go to the test. So refactoring not only implies to the code, but also to the test. So in test, if you see that this line, right, string calculator is sort of repeating everywhere. And what we can do, or let's see what is the problem. What could be the probable problem we might see in future? First thing is that it's a duplicate, right? Everywhere we are duplicating this line, right? And then method call basically happens for every test, but that requires a different parameters, then which is fine. But can we do something about this? Because imagine tomorrow if this constructor gets changed, let's say you want to create this string calculator with some parser or validator as a dependent object, then all this constructor will change, and you have to make this change at multiple places, which is not a good idea. So to avoid that, I can simply extract this out. I can call it a private field for this class, and I'll get rid of all this. Okay, now we are good. Now if you run the test, all of them should pass, and all of them, this says that this can also be final, so let me call it final. Okay, so all of these are passing, no duplicates, we are happy. In the code also, it looks not very good, but decent. Okay, now I'll hold back for one more step. Let's see what is the next step. Allow the add method to handle any amount of numbers. Now here's the problem. Now it says that you might get a string which can have multiple values, right? So the first thing you will be doing is you will be writing the test for that. So your test name should handle more than 2 operands. Okay, this is what basically that requirement tells, right? That allow the add method to handle any amount of numbers, right? So you can think of something like this. It could be anything, right? And if you add this up, 5, 5, 10, 11, 18, 8 is 26. 26 is expected. Now if I run this test, and this will fail, right? This will fail, saying that the sum is this, the expected is 26. Why we are getting 6? If you look at the code, this comes under here, right? It checks for the delimiter. There is a delimiter present, and due to which it is basically extracting it via delimiter. It must be getting multiple values, but here I am just extracting 2 values. So if I just put a debugger over here, just to show you what all values are present here, I'll put a debugger, I'll run this, and let me show you. Yeah. So if you see this numbers list, right, it is having all the values. But what we are doing here, we are extracting only 0 and 1, which is hard coded. And that is why it picks up first two values, 5 and 1, and we are getting 6 as a result, right? So now it is interesting. Now we know that we can do something better here, right? To handle all of it. It is not possible for me to basically hard code all the values for 3, 4, 5, right? No, it could be any number of operands we might get, right? So now what we can do here? Let me think. So this is the way. If you see, when I'm writing the code, when I'm writing the test, when I'm writing or fixing any test case, I'm speaking out loud, right? So that my interviewer should be able to know how I'm approaching, what I'm thinking, and if I'm going in the right direction or wrong direction, right? If I'm doing small refactoring, if I'm extracting out things like delimiter, empty string, why I'm doing that, what benefits we will get, right? If I refactor this, extracted out this string calculator object creation, why I did that, okay? What are the benefits we are getting, right? What problem we may face if we don't do that, right? Everything I explained, right? So in the similar way, you should be performing this round, okay? And think out loud so that the other person should be knowing what you are doing with what reasoning. So let me go to the code and try to see what I can do, the minimal possible thing I can do to fix this. So I know that we are sort of getting string numbers and it can have multiple values. So one thing is clear, that using delimiter, we can split, right? And out of which we will be getting all the operands. And I think that if we have all the operands available, I can simply iterate over it and I can simply sum all the values present here in this array, right? The simplest way to do is that add a for loop here and then probably iterate through each operand and keep a variable sum, initialize it to 0, and then keep adding to it, right? So that is one way, one simple way. Another thing, that if you are familiar with the Java 8, there is a thing called streams. So we'll be using that, arrays.stream. Or let me do like this, operands dot stream. Okay, and then what we are doing, we have this operand, then we might need to do a integer dot parseInt, okay, and then probably on top of this we want to sum it, right? So here what I'm trying to do is basically I'm converting this string array to string, and then I'm trying to pass it to integers. So this has a method called map to int, and then probably on top of this we can simply do a sum. So let me just introduce a local variable, call it sum, and good, instead of this we should be returning sum, and we can get rid of this. So here what I did, I simply utilize this string array of operands. I stream it through the operands. So here I used array.stream to basically stream this operands. I parse it to integer and then I sum it. So this will basically give you summation of all the integer values, okay? And IntelliJ is suggesting to use inline variable so that I can use inline. You don't need to store it in a variable which you are not using anywhere else. So yeah, this is pretty much, I think, will fix our test. Let me go to the test. I should run this, and it is failing. Did I what is the summation? This is 15, 6, 21, 26, yes, 31, 32. I basically incorrectly summed previously, so it should be 32. And if we run this test, we should be getting this. And if you run all the tests, as I mentioned, right, after every small change, you need to run all the tests to see if you have not introduced any bug. Now let's go back to the code. Is it the best code we can write here? Now let's see. The first thing we're doing an empty check. We are returning 0 for that, and then any delimiter, if it is present, it is sort of splitting the values and then returning the sum. And this else was basically for single values. So can we not refactor this code to basically handle these situations as well? For empty string, what we can do is, whenever we are iterating, so imagine that we don't have this if, then what would happen? That if you get a empty string here, and if we don't get basically any delimiter inside it, it will have what? An empty string in the output. So what I mean is that if you get an empty string, I can simply filter it out, right? That your string, incoming string, like operand should not be equal to empty string. If you are not very good with streams, you can use simple if else for loop. Then you can check for each operand if it is empty or not, and accordingly you can parse the data, right? So what it is suggesting me to use, okay, I'll use object.equals, which is fine. What it is doing, it will filter the empty strings. It will only pass the values which are some numbers or operand, and then we'll perform the sum. So I think we can get rid of this. Let me just try running all the tests now. Okay, it failed. Okay, it failed for empty string. It says number format exception. Let me check. So basically what is happening here is that it checks for if it contains a delimiter, because in empty string there will be no delimiter. That's why it is coming here in else block, and we are getting number format exception, which is correct, right? This is how you proceed and you see what you are doing wrong, and then you can rectify it. So now think, do we need this? Like, do we need this check? Imagine either you are getting an empty string or a string with delimiter present in it. How does it matter? What I can simply do is I can simply check if there is any comma, you split it, you give me the operands, and I'll just check if there is any empty string or something which is not required, and if operands are available, I'll simply parse it and sum it, right? Why do we need this? So if we don't need this, we will also be not requiring this. So if I just indent this, now see what is happening. So now you see we have very less code. Let's try to understand this part. Basically we are getting a string. Okay, it can have empty string, one number, two number, or more than two numbers. So what it will check for the delimiter. If it is present, it will split. Okay, if it is an empty string, I guess in that case also it will get one value, which would be empty string. And even for a single value, it will have one value here, one value in this array, and then you will get sum for one value. So if I run all the tests now, see, all of it are passing. So again, I'm saying you might be getting confused with this. If you're not good with streams, what you can do is you can simply write simple for loop and try to see how it is working. What I'm trying to tell you is that if you are passing an empty string, or let's say you are passing one value or two value or more than two values, this will handle all of it, right? And that is the reason all of your tests are getting passed, right? Empty quotes, single value, two value, and more than two value. All of them are satisfied with just this amount of code. Now you see, we started off with very complex code or messy code. You can say that you have multiple if-else branches and then you are doing multiple checks. Now you see the way you progress, your code gets simplified, become more readable, more simpler. And also if you see the test, it is kind of give you a documentation, right? If you read through the test name, if you see what it is doing, you will completely understand what your code does here, what this method is doing, right? So this is the beauty of TDD. Once you start doing it, once you start seeing how your code evolves, how it becomes beautiful, right? Readable, maintainable, right? See, like if you write code like this and if you have tests like this, anyone can come to this code base and contribute easily, right? Because it is very understandable, right? Anyone can come, read this code, read this test, and should be able to contribute, right? So what is the next step? The next step is not something I'm going to do. The next step is something you will have to perform. So this is, there are more requirements, support different delimiters, okay? Calling and with negative number should throw exception, things like that. So there are more requirements to it, okay? And if you click on this link, you should get more requirements. So what I would suggest from this point, I'll be also sharing you a GitHub link. So I have this code already pushed. If you see, there is a repo I've created with string calculator, and if you just open this, if you go to the commit section, you should see a series of commits I have made, right? So it also shows after each progress or each successful test I have committed, and if you go through all of it, you should see how your code changes or evolves, right? What is the final stage? So from this point onwards, what I would suggest or recommend is that you should try what I have done till now, right? You go stepwise, you see where you start and where you end up, how your code evolves, how your test looks like. And once you are comfortable, you go ahead with the other requirements 4, 5, and so on, so that you can practice this. The more you will practice, the better you will become, okay? So yeah, that's it about this video. The whole intention of this video was to show you how you can write TDD. So along with this, I would also like to share this GitHub repository. So if you go, I'll share the link. It is a string calculator repo which I have created. If you go in the commit section, you will see all the commit. Like after every possible test, unit test which I've introduced and the code I've introduced, I kept on incrementally changing it, right, with the requirements. And if you see, I've covered all the requirements and I have done it in a TDD way. So you should see, let's say at 4th commit or 5th commit, your code look like something, right? After 4 more commits, your code changes, you refactor a lot, right? The way we started, and we end up with very small code, right? So things will happen. You will, if you just go ahead and check my code in any commit, you should see it will keep getting better. Okay, so the whole point here is to teach you how to write a code using TDD. What are the benefits of it? So I hope you have get some sense that how our code evolves, it becomes more readable. Okay, and it also allows other user to contribute very easily, right? So I hope I am able to provide some value with this video. If you have any queries or suggestions, or you have something in your mind, any doubts, just reach out to me in the comments or LinkedIn or Instagram, anywhere. I'm available almost in all the platforms except X for now. So do reach out to me. Okay, and by the way, this is very important thing to know when you are interviewing at various companies like ThoughtWorks, Search Softwares, Equal Experts. There are companies like Incubites, Backbase, right? These companies basically give you a coding assessment or a live coding round, PhonePe, right? So these are the companies which will basically ask you a question like this, and if you code like this, then you're a potential candidate, no doubt. So we'll see you in the next video. Till then, I hope you will enjoy this video, and please like and share this video with your friends. It motivates me to create such videos in future. So we'll see you in the next video. Bye.